So there's pretty much anything that, if there's anything that I fear that comes from Need for Speed as of today, it's what I fear the most as to how this new Need for Speed title is coming up. I've never really confessed that I said that I wanted to not make a video about this, but since we're close to October, and we know that last year's October, 2 years ago actually, that Need for Speed Heat was released. However, last year it was delayed for Battlefield 2042 for this year. And I just feel like there's a lot of things that are going to be going on, and that I don't feel like we're really going to be getting a good Need for Speed game. It probably will be, if not, this probably will be the last Need for Speed game to ever exist, considering the fact that Need for Speed, ever since, I'd say like, Most Wanted 2012, the continuation of bad Need for Speed games had gone on since Need for Speed 2015 and Need for Speed Payback at the same time. And people have been mostly saying the same thing about Need for Speed Rivals. I think it was okay, but I mean, it is what it is. And it still continues to be on the deathbed, and I fear the worst that this new title, Need for Speed 2022, will eventually push the game to die off as a game series as a whole for EA games. As far as tension goes, it just feels like that EA will no longer make a new Need for Speed game if this title does not push up for the sales. I mean, surely enough, the sales figures within gaming reality as a whole for the business side of development for these video games are really important, like how many games are sold and how much money was made when it came to selling the games overall. But the main issue is that shouldn't always be the number one focus as of yet, as far as I'm concerned. The main focus, of course, would be to push the development as much as needed within the game itself, to provide the player some fair gameplay physics and mechanics to play throughout the game. Also gameplay content that we would like to see within these kind of titles. And honestly, this applies for every single racing game that ever exists, not just shooting or action or even adventure games that are out there. I'm talking about Need for Speed, and I'm talking about NASCAR, Grid, F1, any kind of racing game that goes out there within certain people's expectations, which some will push through to even further than the expectations needed. However, EA Games has been lacking on the whole entire ideology on pushing to people's expectations and trying to meet the reality that they're still a shit company making games that are ultimately shitty, and that they're making money. They're supposed to be money grabs. It's basically clickbait of game development companies themselves, as far as I'm concerned. This is being said because of the controversies they've been involved in, which is, of course, selling loot boxes for pay-to-win content within their games that they've made so far. And Star Wars Battlefront 2 from 2017 is one of those few games that has loot boxes as far as attention goes. Even though it's not really purchased as much, it still exists either way. But these loot boxes are mainly spotted inside of sports games. I mean by UFC games, that's if EA still makes these games. NHL, that's the same thing. FIFA, basketball, well, NBA, but 2K has been making the NBA nowadays. NFL, any kind of sports games that is out there, or even probably some shooter games. You could take Titanfall as an example, even though the Titanfall is not going to get another title soon. I'm sorry that I mentioned it if it triggers a few people, but still, you get the idea. The EA games would have put loot boxes inside of their games before they got taken down by that kind of idea by governments and stuff like that. It goes to show that, of course, EA Games don't really care about their customers and or fans, or even the Need for Speed community as a whole. But does anyone out there give an absolute fuck? Absolutely not, I guess. I hardly even see people just care about this kind of stuff. And if I did, they probably most likely would not want to buy a new game, which I could understand. They don't need to get the new game if they don't want to. It's like the same controversial issue with Rockstar Games re-releasing Grand Theft Auto 5 for the PS5 and Xbox Series X, which is unfairly unadjusted. I mean, We're close to the decade already. We're around the corner. We just need to wait till next year on October and reach a full-on fucking decade that we played GTA 5. And we would like to utilize our time on a new game instead of this same shit. But I mean, let's think about EA and Rockstar. What makes them both different? Well, I, for one, would like to say that EA games, at least they're not like Rockstar games, and they don't release the same game just for people to play. They release a new game each year or so. But even if that were to be the case, money is still inside of their vision. That's the main thing they focus on nowadays. I do have a friend that had told me that money is the main focus as to gaming today, which is pretty much true now at times. But the thing that game studios needs to focus on, and development companies, is to actually provide fair gameplay physics and mechanics if they want to make more better sales than what they currently have right now. I mean, like Need for Speed Heat wasn't the best game ever made. It did get a decent amount of sales. However, it wasn't the best selling out of all other Need for Speed games pre-existing before Need for Speed Heat had came out, as well as Need for Speed Payback and Need for Speed 2015, as well as rivals. Another thing they focus on is making DLCs, which is just constantly annoying that we see every single game that EA happens to make so far. It doesn't really need to be necessary for us to buy DLC content all the freaking time. Also, when it comes to Need for Speed, I've been seeing that every single Need for Speed game never really got updates, which is quite infuriating as far as tension goes. Because the gaming world into today's generation, I would say today's century, is that we need updates for at least to keep us entertained within these games. And it could be any kind of game that EA makes so far. It could be like Need for Speed. It could be like any sports games. I mean, they've been focusing on the sports games as well as Battlefront, but the one game series they never focus on updating in a very long while, or actually at all, is the Need for Speed series, which is pretty much just plain downright a bad decision. They really, even if the game doesn't have very much people playing the game series themselves, EA still needs to at least get players back in somehow with new content, with updates, new cars, new events, anything that we could do, or even more shit to experience within the game. But instead they just make it a bare game that it is, hardly even updated, and just leave it to die. This controversial scenario is starting to remind me of Team Fortress 2, because as for Team Fortress 2, it has been like nearly, or probably has been a decade, or half a second decade since Team Fortress 2 has ever gotten an update for quite a very long while. And the only way I can remember this is happening is by Need for Speed, and this is via Need for Speed Heat that we have gotten 2 or 3 years ago. I was inside of a live stream, in Black Panther's live stream, when he was playing Need for Speed The Run. It was called the shortest Need for Speed ever, and his live chat replay is not available as of today. However, I did respond to something similarly saying that this new Need for Speed, that it really would need new updates, because much like Need for Speed Heat, I prefer to play a game that at least gets some new content here and there, instead of playing a fucking abandonware game with just 2 or 1 minor update, and that's about it, and then my day is done, I'm fucking bored, I don't want to play the game anymore. And this is how he responded.
Will most likely become abandonware after development and selling, even if minor updates. That makes no sense.
I mean, you gotta think about it, Black Panther. The minor updates are not gonna be very much. I mean, sure, they could be if they're like small stuff for content and minor bug glitches, but if it's not going to be any of those, then they're ultimately bad updates as far as I'm concerned. I would prefer something like moderate to a big update to the game that gives us new opportunities to play the game than what it is, bare stock. You see Need for Speed Heat. We were supposed to get updates on that game, however, we didn't get very much. We just got like, what, 2-3 updates, and that's about it, and we never got any more updates after that. One update being the bug fix when the cars jump for no apparent reason, which I could respect since I hate the car jumping for no apparent reason. Another update when 2 cars were added in, but one of them's a DLC. I hated it, but it happened when Criterion Games was taken over. Update 3, crossplay for the Need for Speed Heat, which was the last update. I fucking hated it because it wouldn't make a difference either way because there's no PvP within the game as a whole anyways.
Here's something that people don't understand. Heat did not receive updates because Heat failed.
Yeah, I wouldn't even see Heat as a successful game either. And here is why. Because it's made by the same fuck-ups that made 2015 and Payback. I hated 2015 because it has online gameplay, even if you're playing single player, which this should have been saved. This should have been utilized more for Need for Speed the World online related games instead of this bullshit. I don't want an internet connection to be playing a game that might catch my interest and to play single player with an online connection only. That is ultimately bullshit. I don't even give a shit if the Supra is in there. I fucking hated the game because of that shit. Another reason why I hate the game is because, well, even though it looks realistic, the realisticality has been flawed when you got a break the drift feature inside the game. I hated Need for Speed Payback because it has this bullshit roulette system where you gotta get parts and you gotta use your cards in order to get those parts to use the roulette system. Whatever the shit, however it just works. And the story is this is not even Need for Speed. It's a fucking ripoff of Fast and Furious. I liked it better when Need for Speed's a racing game, and that's about it. You have to keep in mind, Need for Speed started off as a racing game. I get the idea that people like to share different ideas. However, it just doesn't mix in very well for the franchise most of the time. And Need for Speed Payback's idea on the story, it doesn't look like it mixes in very well at all, to my point of view. And the voice acting is ultimately shitty. They could have hired guys that were from the actual nations. Like Mac as an example. He was supposed to have like a British accent since he was supposed to be a character from Britain that moved to the United States.
Don't expect that to work next time. Party?
Mac attack is ready to roll.
Focus, Mac. Gotta get through this. Find your smile. Hey! Hush, puppy. Big fan of your channel. Get in the car. Tyler, is that you, bro? It's been a rough 6 months without the old crew. So bored, mate. It's Jess on it too. Work faster.
The director behind the voice acting, as well as the storyboarding and the cutscenes editing, should have been fired day one. Need for Speed Payback was being made based on how fucking cringy Max's voice is, because he is not British at all, the way I hear it. Richard Hammond or Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear does better than this fucking idiot. He does not even sound British at all. Instead, it sounds like, what? Ass munchin'. Yeah, it sounds more like ass munchin' than British. Another reason why people hated Need for Speed Payback was mainly the car damage. It looked absolutely fake. Even Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 and Rivals beat this. The realistic windshield cracks and the visual damage looks appealing, but it's poor in Payback. And I'm reading this based on a small article on Quora as to why Need for Speed Payback is hated. And I don't really pay attention to the damage that much, as it's not really my main issue, because damage, it just isn't very appealing at all if there's no actual function to it than the form of it, as far as tension goes on my certain point of view when it comes to playing racing games. And last but not least, Heat. I mean, this game's decent amongst the other two. It's not the best like Underground, but it was okay. It just wasn't exceeding to my levels that it was going to be a very good game as anticipated, because, you know, the sales was probably not going to be enough and stuff like that. Even if Heat was just a decent game, not the best out there to exist, Ghost Games is still a fuck up, and I hate the studio for my whole entire life.
Heat was the most successful Need for Speed launch ever.
But you gotta understand, Panther, you're talking about the launch of the game, and that's not the main focus we need to deal with. Not during the launch of the sales. We also have to focus on after the launch of the sales. Try like days, weeks, months. Because no matter how much you try to slice it, even though this is highly biased on EA's part, money is the main focus so far when it comes to gaming. And in EA's case, this is a high majority ideology they have so far. They don't focus on the gameplay physics and mechanics to make them better or anything like that. And thus explains why Criterion Games wasn't able to finish Need for Speed Most Wanted 2, however named it Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012, which was essentially a burnout game with licensed cars and a lot of reused assets. Yeah, that's accurate enough.
The issue was, someone needs to get the blame when something goes wrong.
I mean, surely enough, the blame was mostly EA Games when it comes to the whole entire money-making ideologies they have so far. But I would say it's mainly Ghost Games, since, you know, like I said, they fucked up on making Need for Speed 2015 and Payback, which is probably why people didn't want to buy this game, because they think that Ghost Games fucked up this game too. That's a massive majority as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how many people thought, oh, I'm not gonna get this game because it's made by Ghost Games and they fucked it up. Well, I can only assume the numbers are somewhat high as far as I'm concerned. In fact, much more higher than Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012's community when it comes to buying and not buying that game compared to this game that we're talking about. Of course, Need for Speed Heat. But I mean, Need for Speed 2022, it's being made by Criterion Games, so a lot of things might bound to change. That's a good thing. The thing that concerns me the most is if the game studio will be making updates to this game. Because like I said, I don't want to be playing the game for a little bit until I'm already finished with it and I have to go play something else. That's not what I would like to do. I want to find some more stuff to do inside of the game. I want to drive new cars. I want to do more races. And without these updates, what the fuck else am I gonna do? Am I gonna go play Star Wars: The Old Republic, or am I gonna go play Conquer Live and Reloaded on my Xbox? Probably so, because I'm fucking bored of Need for Speed 2022 since they don't have any new updates. That's even if the game doesn't get updates. If it does, then I'll be fine with it.
And the microtransaction time of Battlefront 2 and Rivals, Ghost got the blame.
You're actually wrong on the microtransactions going to Ghost when it comes to Battlefront. I mean, Rivals, kind of. Battlefront 2? Absolutely not, because two studios, also known as DICE and Criterion Games, were focusing on Battlefront 2 from 2017. And as far as I'm concerned, they both were working underneath EA's payroll to not only add just a small amount of content, plus some bullshit gameplay physics and mechanics, but they've also been ordered to put in some loot boxes, which is, of course, like any other game that EA released so far, is also a fucking controversy at this point on. Not only a controversy to the public's eyes and ears, but also the government's eyes and ears at the same time. I mean, if you look at a court session when the United Kingdom was giving EA the lawsuit, you'll understand about what I'm trying to say. The only way Ghost Games could fuck up Rivals is the gameplay is ultimately bad at some certain point, to where the game crashes for no apparent reason when you're trying to do one of the races. The progression doesn't save at a certain point either, or even the car jumps for no fucking apparent reason when you're just driving in a straight line of road down to wherever the hell you're going, if you're playing free roam or if you're just straight up racing. And another thing that they fucked up Rivals as well is also the massive amounts of DLC they put into the game. I ultimately fucking hate it when there's a lot of DLC in the game that I gotta pay for, but it exists.
That was their death, not Heat.
Not Heat? I think the revision should be more of not only Heat, because as far as I'm concerned, 2015 and Payback were also the same fuck-ups that led to Ghost Games' deathbed, as you say, or downgrade, as I prefer to call it, since they should be lucky enough that they didn't get shut down like fucking Black Box Studios. Black Box Studios is like no longer a company making games, no longer a studio, they're nothing. And Ghost Games is still alive. Jesus fucking Christ, it's called EA Gothenburg. That means they're still alive, they're just not called what you think they are. Again, as to why. 2015, online play, even if single player mode. I fucking hated that. A lot of people hated that. That's probably what led to a lot of refunds after the game was played for a little bit, after people tried it out for a bit. And that's being said for people who don't have an online connection. And also the break the drift feature wasn't the best thing to exist, since it breaks the continuity of realism inside of the game. The game looks realistic, however it doesn't feel realistic. And another thing is, the story kind of okay, but
Oh, my man, you made it. Looking smooth, man. That's good. Yo. Welcome to the clan, brother. Trading up. Come on, Ames, I just need you to listen to it. Make sure she's purring like she's supposed to. What's up, man? Please, please.
Oh.
She's parked just outside.
Spike.
Come on.
Hey! Guess I underestimated you.
Haters gonna hate. Phone. Hello, ladies.
What? No hug, man?
Hey, I wouldn't want to snap that skinny frat boy frame in half.
All right. Are we gonna find some trouble or just stand in a circle and make fun of Spike?
the characters are just too fucking childish. I'll just say that much. Even if there was famous people like Ken Block or the guy who made the RWB, it didn't make a difference. The game was ultimately a bad fucking Need for Speed game. Payback. Reasons. Roulette systems. Who wants to spend their money just to buy cards to pay for this roulette system to get good parts? Me? No. Probably you. I don't know. I can't say. I could only assume though. However, I would not want to go wasting my money just to get some cards to utilize a roulette system just to get a good pair of parts. That is ultimately stupid, and the way to get cards is ultimately interesting. However, it's less rewarding as far as tension goes, and we've seen the habit of EA making games where there's less rewards to reap and more stuff to buy when it comes to in-game purchases. So EA, with the whole entire in-game purchase bullshit, is all on them. They're getting the studios like Criterion and DICE to do this shit for Battlefront 2 from 2017. It explains the loot boxes, and also explains the DLCs to Rivals. It's just a lot of games. DLCs, in-game purchases, any kind of bullshit. Even monthly subscriptions for their EA Play nowadays. Back to subject, Payback's story is so fucking bad that I ultimately would prefer to watch Fast and Furious 9 instead of playing this fucking game. And this is being said as of today. If it came to the same year where Payback was made, I would have gone back and watched Fast and Furious fucking 7, because that's probably the exact year that the movie was closely made to, or Fast and Furious 6 or whatever the hell, because at least those movies were somewhat good, even though that the Fast and Furious movies are becoming more ridiculous nowadays. Because this game is ultimately an EA clone, a ripoff, a steal, plagiarism of Fast and Furious. This is ultimately, look at this, explosions going out when you go out of your car or drive a car out of the trailer from a semi-truck, the police chases, all that kind of shit. This is ultimately a ripoff of Fast and Furious. What's gonna be next inside of Need for Speed Payback? What if there's a sequel to Payback 2 and there's a fucking tank driving in the middle of nowhere that's gonna blow your fucking ass to smithereens? Holy fucking shit, this is why I'm absolutely glad that Ghost Games is not making another Need for Speed game. Because if they made Payback 2, they're gonna make it more ridiculous than Need for Speed Payback, to the point where I just wanna fucking puke. I want to fucking vomit because it exists.
Heat had clearly already started development. EA had hopes.
Actually, I might agree, Panther. But the thing you need to understand is that the way you said about EA having hopes is not the way you think about it so far. And here's what I could say. It's because EA Games has been focusing on making game sales. So the high hope of EA Games when it comes to Need for Speed Heat that we had gotten was to see how many sales the copies made and how much money they made overall. And they made a certain amount that they want sold and the amount of money they want made out of those copies. And I don't feel like the game had made into those two categories. So EA did not have hopes morally for the game. However, they had hopes for the money making part. And as for game development, yeah, sure, kind of, but not completely. As you can see, the map did use a few reused assets. However, it used plenty of newly made assets so far. The game, however, reused the exact same asset, the very same one, the one that is important to the whole entire game itself, not cars. It's called gameplay, physics, and mechanics. It's been utilized inside of Need for Speed 2015. I think it was much more updated than Rivals, but then it got reused 2 more times, which was for Payback and for Heat. So yeah, that's not my surprise right there. So to conclude on Panther's part, Ghost Games did fuck up, but I couldn't even say that they fuck up on Battlefront 2 from 2017, since I did see on the cover within the game that the physical copy on my Xbox One that Ghost Games has no time. There's no logo of Ghost Games anywhere on that game. I mean, they do way worse shit than Criterion Games would ever do for Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012. That I ultimately would probably want to play 2012, Most Wanted 2012, yes, instead of this shit, because at least Criterion Games knew how to make a game. They had a lot more experience instead of a big gawk up of a mix-over between DICE and Criterion, which is to be Ghost Games. Honestly, Ghost Games is a fuck-up experimentation of 2 nations getting together and working on a game. I'm not saying in discrimination, I'm saying in general that this was a bad idea and should have never occurred to be the case. I mean, combining 2 studios when it comes to making a new one kind of is an interesting perspective to go by. However, when it comes to certain expectations that people are going to meet, it's never going to be equal to what they want. And in this case, EA Games, after making Ghost Games inside of Gothenburg, Sweden, which composes of DICE and Criterion workers, was kind of a bad idea, to be honest, since there's rarely even a workforce of people who wants to make a video game inside of the city of Gothenburg, or in the town of Gothenburg. Even if there's people that want to do the workforce for working on making a video game, I'm pretty certain a certain majority of people would probably want to make the games themselves, or make their own studios and or development companies to make the games that they would like, even though it's going to take like a lot of money just to do this kind of stuff. So with this being said, we're on the gaming today as to Need for Speed, not yesterday. The game needs updates, no matter what. If the game doesn't get updates, even if it's bug fixes, then the game is going to be abandonware. No one's going to play it anymore. At least, I probably wouldn't even want to play it. I mean, hell, Air 12 probably won't even play it as soon as he's done playing the game, and that he feels like there's nothing else to do after playing, like, what, a few rounds of whatever minigames he plays, or even the campaign and stuff like that. Anyone can be done with the game as soon as they feel like they're done with it. They're done with the campaign. They're done with whatever side missions that exist within the game. If there's no new updates, and if there's no new, like, events for us to go through, no new cars to drive, then that's it. the game, if we don't get those updates, the game's abandonware. We're no longer going to play anymore. That's a certain majority of us players that play games into today's date. I mean, look at Forza. How can you Forza has been updating their games ever since, what, Horizon 1 or some motorsport? I don't really know. How can that studio turn 10, keep updating their games, meanwhile you have this shitbagger EA Games not updating and say Need for Speed is perfectly fine? I mean, pretty much, but based on how you see it, you make it seem like Need for Speed is fine the way it is. It's in a fucking dumpster fire. So, no, it's not fine. It's never going to be fine. It never will be good than Forza. Right, so since we're finished with that part, I want to get into why the game needs the updates. So, ever since Need for Speed Heat, we were supposed to get updates. However, we really never gotten to get into updates because, well, new management, EA basically made Criterion work on Need for Speed now, and Ghost Games has been downgraded into EA Gothenburg. And I feel like it's a smart move for Criterion to actually be making new Need for Speed games, since they happen to have more experience than Ghost Games to be making racing games. This is being said not only for Need for Speed, but they've also been working on that since Burnout Paradise. Surely enough, long before Burnout Paradise was made, but they went from there all the way to 2008 and then to today when it came to Need for Speed 2010. But yet now we're at 2022, and what worries me about this new Need for Speed title that Criterion is working on, I am worried of how the state of this game is going to go. I mean, sure, it's going to have DLC. It's probably going to be that obvious because EA, they care about money, not the customers. They don't care about making good games. Anyways, I'm worried of if Criterion Games will actually be updating this game from time to time to give us new content or not. Because if they don't, I feel like this game is gonna be abandoned where within like a few days, maybe even like a week or two, and then people are done, no longer gonna play the game because it doesn't get any more updates. There's no new content like cars, missions, races, events, whatever, anything like that. That's the one thing I fear about this game that happens to give me the same trauma experience since Need for Speed Heat, because after the crossplay update, we never gotten any other new update after that because, as I said, new management. But that would mean we get no new races, and ultimately the races within the black market, I just feel like they're boring that I don't even want to play.
The only Need for Speed game, yet the only one they could think of that has ever gotten updates so far within their own time would be Need for Speed World. And I would say it's most likely car updates and probably some content updates when it comes to new events to get these cars, considering the fact that, well, you know, the studios behind Need for Speed World was actually willing to provide updates, even though the Need for Speed World was mainly an online game, which of course didn't really need a membership for you to actually play through the game. However, it required an internet connection, which kind of makes sense because it was for the PC, and that you could play through it, you play with other online players, you race against your friends inside of that game, you could do anything, and all the other, and it's pretty much Need for Speed Carbon, just modified to a different kind of extent as far as I can see it. And ultimately, this game's been getting updates for I don't know how many years, but it's from its time starting, it didn't get really very much updates, but these updates were being developed for the game, and they were mainly about new cars and stuff like that. This was before EA decided to shut down Need for Speed World, since the developers of the game was no longer making the updates anymore, and or just don't seem the interest of having the studio anymore, because it feels like that
that studio that makes Need for Speed World updates, as well as Need for Speed World itself, didn't really make very much sales on the game, as far as I am concerned. And not only that, but EA has also been having some shaky relations with car companies. So sometimes licensing is gone, so that's why they end up removing the game at one point soon. And to be honest, when it comes to EA having shaky relations with the car companies, I can only assume it's because the EA is not paying the car companies a specific amount that they would really like, which kind of understandable. I'm just not certain if it's actually true though. From time to time again, whether it be sports and car companies within EA, they will most likely terminate the partnerships unless necessary that EA wants to have them back. They've been having this kind of shaky relation. I probably would say more likely as to Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2010, since we weren't really seeing very much of any other sports cars that are out there that we haven't gotten to see as of yet. Not only that, but it's also possible that these car companies did not want us to see the cars just about yet, or that we should experience them inside of the real world. Anyways, with this being said, I would prefer to see game updates to be moderate to big updates, since really I would like to see more content within the game to go through. Probably like more cars to drive within the game, to experience, to have fun with, you know how it is. I mean, we've been seeing that since Forza Horizon series, and Horizon 5, they're still doing it today. And the same could apply for racing. I want to see new races. I want to do more races inside of the game. I don't really like doing a few set of races that are for the campaign only and just finish it up and then just call it a day, and that there's nothing else for me to do after that, and that we don't have any other updates coming up for the game. Honestly, I'd be bored to hell, and I want to play something else instead of playing this game if there's no more updates. But I can't jump into conclusion that Criterion should release updates for this game as of yet, since the game has not released initially and we don't know what the game is actually called so far. But I'm just saying, if this game comes out and if people probably would like to see some new stuff, like new races, new cars, all that kind of stuff. So if possible, Criterion Games really needs to focus on updating Need for Speed 2022 to provide more content such as races and cars as mentioned before. And that's my main concern right there, since we were supposed to get that since Need for Speed Heat. Ghost was supposed to promise us on that. They've been really slow on progress into doing that stuff. If Criterion wants to do the same thing, if they want to provide updates for the new Need for Speed game, I am hoping that they could release it at a certain steady pace instead of Ghost Games, since Ghost Games did take a long while just to release like one new update as far as tension goes. Another thing I most likely would fear inside of the case of Need for Speed 2022 is the overall results that are going to come in for this game. EA is probably going to expect a high number of game sales and money to be made when this game is going to full on release, drop down into probably an E3 or so, and just fully release and just be out there for the sales. However, I feel like the number would not be high as the money made by the amount and the amount of games sold overall. And this is what I fear the most, because if this doesn't turn out to be true, if it doesn't turn out to be a high number, the future of Criterion and Need for Speed as a whole will most likely grim. It probably will die out as a series if this game does not really pick up on its pace, if EA doesn't make some changes on their own part to at least provide us a better game instead of focusing on money all the time. However, EA is just going to be EA. EA is going to be EA. It doesn't really matter my decision. There's nothing we could do to actually change their minds at all as far as I am concerned. So ultimately, there's nothing I can do at my part, and as for the community can't really do very much on their own part too. They could keep trying and trying and trying to tell EA to change their mind, but however, it most likely won't work as far as I know it. And this just the full-on results is what I fear the most out of all. Because if we look back when Criterion made Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012, the results were mixed, but a little bit slightly to the bad side, since people didn't like how it turned up to be at the end of the day. And then we pushed over to Ghost Games making Need for Speed Rivals, if I'm not mistaken. It was kind of moderate. It wasn't the best, but it was kind of moderate. Anyways, with that being said, next up, Need for Speed 2015. Results are supposed to be positive based on reviews. However, I see it as the negative results because there's plenty of people. I'm pretty certain there's a slight percentage of people that actually hated this game because of, like I said before, the online feature where you gotta have an internet connection in order to play single player mode, and the brake to drift feature. I mean, the brake to drift feature is common, so I don't even know why I'm bringing that up. And story's too childish, it's unskippable, and that's pretty much about it. And if I'm missing anything else, feel free to let me know, and I'll see about what I missed. Another thing I fear that might eventually become evident at a certain point is that EA's is going to put a high expectation rate for the game sales and the money that is made in total when Criterion Games made the game, released the game, and how many copies has it been sold, and what the net worth was as to the sale of the game as far as I'm concerned. Because if you think about it, sales are pretty much important. EA, as I would say, again, is always wanting the sales overall instead of the quality of the game. And their numbers, they expect it to be high. If it's not high, then you know EA, they like to shut down studios or downgrade them or whatever the hell they do with them to ensure that they do not screw up. Again, but this time, like, never at all. And I fear the Criterion will live up to the same issue, the same situation as to Black Box Studios, where Criterion Games might possibly shut down after Need for Speed 2022 if it doesn't live up to the success of the sales overall based on the game copies and the amount of money made into this game as a whole. That doesn't mean that I'm gonna go out of my own way and say, oh, I need you guys to buy this new Need for Speed game, otherwise Criterion Games is gonna shut down and then it's gonna be your fault. No. People don't have to buy the game if they don't want to. That's their own decision. However, if the people don't buy the game, like, enough copies sold and the enough money made that EA expects it to be, then it might be evident that Criterion Games might shut down and Need for Speed will officially never be worked on ever again. Unless it will, but EA is going to need a new studio to actually do work on this. Probably utilize Codemasters to actually make this game possible. I just feel like Codemasters would put it into a different level. Somewhat relatable to like Need for Speed Shift, but in Codemasters' kind of style, like they did so far for the Race Driver Grid, Race Driver Grid 2, Race Driver Grid Autosport, or Motorsport, or whatever, and some of the other games that Codemasters have been making so far as I know. However, I don't know. It might be possible. I just can't seem to confirm just yet. We have to wait until the game releases, and we'll have to see what happens at that point when how many sales overall Criterion has made for the new Need for Speed game, which is Need for Speed 2022, since we've yet to receive a title, the name of this new Need for Speed game that is up on the makes as far as tension goes. And I highly doubt that Codemasters will probably make a new Need for Speed game, since, you know, EA Games has Codemasters been making the F1 games because, well, I don't know, because they see Codemasters as an F1 development team. So yeah, that should be pretty much accurate. I don't think it is, but it could. And thus leading me to say that Need for Speed will probably, maybe so, if not mistaken, officially be dead, because EA's corporate decisions have become too corruptive and too non-productive as far as I'm concerned when it comes to making good games for a certain point of time. I mean, they need to EA Games really need to focus on making new games, and they need to focus on the further development time that is actually needed to be put out for these kind of games. Need for Speed is no exception whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned. And this is being said because we're talking about racing with cars. We're talking about possibly modifying them. We're talking about possibly going off-roading. We're talking about possibly going out into the track and race with these cars. We're also talking about free roaming. We're talking about driving around in the landscapes that currently pre-exists within these Need for Speed games as far as tension goes. But then again, corporate decisions by EA and Andrew Wilson, and they're ultimately, I feel like if this does not turn out to be successful, eventually at the end of the day, by the long run, Need for Speed will no longer be a good game anymore. It probably would die out as a franchise as a whole, as far as I'm concerned. That's possible. I just don't think it's gonna happen right away, but it is possible. Anyways, with that being said, everyone, thank you guys for watching the video. If you're new to this channel, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you wish to do so. And, well, let's just hope for the best that Need for Speed 2022 isn't gonna be the very last of the Need for Speed series as a whole. And with that being said, I shall see you people in the next episode.